Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a truly unique project, a house that's half underground within a frame roof made entirely of hay. Sounds interesting, right? Let's explore how this incredible structure was built. Join me as we check it out. I made my way up a small hill, scanning for the perfect spot to start building this unique house. With the location settled, the work could begin. I grabbed a sturdy tree branch and used it to sketch the outline of the house right onto the ground. After marking out the dimensions, I took a shovel and began clearing away the layer of grass, dry leaves, and other loose vegetation covering the surface. Once everything was marked and cleared, I knew it was time to get my hands into the earth and start digging. I grabbed my shovel and began removing the soil layer by layer. I worked carefully along the outline I had sketched earlier, taking care to dig precisely along the planned edges to keep the foundation strong and evenly shaped. I kept digging, following the lines I had set out, and making sure each part of the space was level and uniform. The outline of the house was becoming more defined with every scoop of dirt, transforming from a simple sketch on the surface to a real, three-dimensional space below ground. While I dug, I wasn't alone. My two dogs, who had been by my side since I started this journey, eagerly joined in. They seemed to sense the excitement and purpose behind the work, and without hesitation, they started digging with me. The digging finally came to an end once I had excavated down to about waist height. Next on my agenda was to gather materials for reinforcing the walls above ground. With a handful of branches in tow, I returned to the construction site, ready to start reinforcing the perimeter. I carefully chose branches that were compact enough to handle, but had a pointed end, which would allow me to drive them into the ground more easily. I began by driving the pointed ends of the branches into the ground around the edges of the house, creating a solid frame. Once the vertical branches were secured, I took longer branches and began laying them horizontally across the top. After securing them in place, I packed soil around the structure, pressing it firmly to prevent any shifts or movements. This layer of earth would help lock the branches into position and provide further stability, ensuring that nothing would fall into the hollow space below. Next, I began to dig into the earth once more, this time focusing on forming a small staircase. I dug out a small section, creating a flat surface, then moved on to the second step, repeating the same technique. I dug down about 3 or 4 steps, gradually making each one slightly lower than the last. Once I had the basic structure of the staircase in place, I reinforced each step by packing the soil tightly around the edges to prevent erosion and ensure stability. Next, it was time to gather branches for the roof of the house. After some searching, I found 2 Y-shaped branches that were perfect for my needs. Their unique shape would serve as the main support columns for the roof. I carefully dug holes on either side of the house, directly opposite each other, to accommodate the 2 Y-shaped branches. I packed the soil tightly around their bases, anchoring them securely into the ground. I selected a long, straight branch to serve as a crossbeam, which would connect the 2 Y-shaped supports. With the main structure of the roof in place, it was time to add the frame supports that would give it shape and stability. Starting with one end of the crossbeam, I leaned the first branch against it at a slight angle, extending down towards the ground. I secured the top end of this branch tightly to the crossbeam using twine, ensuring it was fastened securely. The other end of the branch reached down toward the ground, ready for additional support. To keep the bottom of the branch in place and prevent it from slipping, I took a small, sturdy piece of wood and drove it into the ground beside the branch. Next, I continued to lay additional branches across the rafters, spacing them evenly from the peak down to the eaves. Each branch was tied securely at both ends, ensuring they formed a continuous, sturdy roofline. As I worked, I noticed how the combination of the long branches with the triangular structure of the rafters create an impressive frame silhouette. I gathered a selection of smaller branches, perfect for creating a flat platform on each step of the staircase. I began by gathering 3 sturdy logs that would form the main support for the bed frame. I laid them out parallel to each other on the ground, spaced evenly apart to create a solid base. I placed one branch at one end of the logs and the other at the opposite end, laying them horizontally across the 3 logs. With the frame complete, I searched for additional smaller logs and branches to create the surface of the bed. I arranged the smaller pieces side by side, filling the space evenly to create a solid platform. I cleared a circular patch of earth on the ground, removing any debris to create a safe spot for the flames. Once the area was prepared, I gathered dry twigs, leaves, and small branches to use as kindling. After arranging them carefully in the center of the circle, I struck a match and ignited the pile. I positioned the skewers over the fire, turning them occasionally to ensure they cooked evenly. The aroma of the meat sizzling over the flames filled the air, and I couldn't help but feel excited about the delicious meal I was about to enjoy. I sat cross-legged beside the warm fire, feeling grateful for this moment of respite. I shared the delightful meal with my 2 dogs. I set off to gather dry grass stalks, each about the thickness of my finger, along with some sturdy branches. These materials would be perfect for creating a door frame and reinforcing the walls above ground. Once I had collected a good amount of materials, I selected 2 long, straight logs, each tapered to a point at one end. I carefully positioned them at the base of the stairs, ensuring they stood firmly in the ground and formed a sturdy entryway to my underground retreat. I took additional logs and cut them to the appropriate lengths, laying them horizontally across the top and bottom of the vertical supports. I secured these horizontal pieces tightly with twine, ensuring they were firmly anchored and created a solid frame. With the door frame firmly in place, I carefully began arranging the dry grass stalks within the frame, one by one, positioning them vertically from top to bottom. The goal was to create a solid yet natural-looking barrier, so I ensured each stalk was lined up closely with the next, filling the frame entirely. I grabbed my saw and carefully trimmed away any excess, working along the edges to ensure everything was even and smooth. I continued using dry grass stalks to create a natural and sturdy barrier. Starting at one side of the frame, I gathered bunches of grass and arranged them vertically against the wall, carefully aligning them to follow the slope of the roof. I trimmed the grass stalks to match the angle of the frame roof, ensuring a clean, uniform edge that followed the slope perfectly. Once I had a line of grass stalks in place, I took a small mallet and drove a wooden stake into the ground at the base of each bunch, securing the grass tightly. I began by digging a small, circular pit directly opposite my bed, ensuring it was located a safe distance away from any flammable materials. I dug down carefully, creating a hole that was both deep and wide enough to hold a fire comfortably, without spreading. The pit would serve as the fire chamber, providing a stable base to contain the flames. To enhance ventilation, I planned to create a chimney-like passage leading up to the surface, allowing smoke to escape and fresh air to feed the fire. From the base of the pit, I began to dig a sloped tunnel that angled up toward the surface of the ground. I gathered a small container of water. I started by taking for small, sturdy branches, each sharpened to a point on one end. These would serve as stabilizing stakes for the chimney's base. Next, I mixed the water with a generous amount of earth, forming a thick mud. To strengthen this mixture, I added handfuls of dry grass, kneading it in until I had a sticky, fibrous clay. With the mixture ready, I applied it around the smoke vent, packing it in tightly to form the first layer dot to reinforce the chimney. I gathered several stones and began arranging them around the vent, carefully layering them one on top of the other. I continued this process, gradually building the chimney up until it reached about half my height, which would provide sufficient ventilation while maintaining stability. With the final layer of stones in place and sealed with mud, I took a large plastic tarp and spread it carefully across the frame structure, smoothing it over the contours of the roof. Next, I began layering the roof with dry grass. I carefully arranged each handful of grass so that the pointed tops faced upward toward the roof's peak, while the thicker, rooted ends were nestled securely into the packed earth at the base of the frame. Working from the bottom up, I continued layering the grass until completed. I took the door I had crafted earlier and carefully fitted it over the entrance at the top of the stairs. Next, I wanted to make a small addition for my loyal companions. I measured a spot near the base of the door and set about crafting a small window-like opening, just large enough for my 2 dogs to slip in and out freely. I fashioned a tiny frame for the opening, ensuring it was stable and wouldn't compromise the door's structure. I inspected the entire structure to identify any remaining gaps or open spaces around the walls. Using more bundles of dry grass, I carefully filled these areas, pressing the grass firmly into any small crevices to ensure no drafts or insects could make their way inside. This final step not only strengthened the walls, but also added an extra layer of insulation, sealing in warmth and keeping the space protected. The door, the cozy dog entrance, and the carefully insulated walls had transformed the house into a snug, inviting retreat. My dogs were already exploring their new doorway, slipping in and out with excitement, adding a warm touch of life and energy to the space. I gathered a few large, flat stones and arranged them carefully around the stove, creating a sturdy ring that would support a grill rack. Once the grill was set, I used a stick to rake a few glowing coals out from the main fire and onto the stones, creating a warm bed of heat beneath the grill. For dinner, I prepared a simple meal of vegetables, slicing them carefully and placing them in a pan. When the food was ready, I enjoyed my meal in the warmth of the firelight, savoring each bite with a deep sense of satisfaction. Once I'd finished eating, I spread out a sleeping bag on the bed frame, making a cozy, inviting spot to rest. With everything in place, I let my eyes drift closed, ending the day with a sense of accomplishment and peace.